This manga turned me into a degenerate, but more importantly, it'll turn you into one too. We're pretending you're not one already. I've read countless series that many people would claim to be able to do the same, but none have ever come close to the subtlety and tactfulness that this manga uses to complete your reluctant transformation. In just a few chapters, this manga has you hooked in its trap, and before you know it, you're questioning not just your dignity, but your very morality. Yet, let me explain, and you may just come out the other side a degenerate, sure, but you'll think about the anime, manga, fiction you consume in a completely different light. MILFs. A degeneracy icon, really. If you're going to war, you take your guns. If you're going to questionable manga territory, you take your MILFs. If this manga is going to have any hope of doing what I claim it to do, then you already know what it has. A widow. Shit, yeah, she doesn't have kids. She has a dead husband. But she's older than the main character. Finally, some juicy romance that isn't between high school students. Look, she doesn't need kids to contextualize her attractiveness, as a wise man once said.
I don't need it to be like their fucking mom. I just need it to be a hot lady who's older.
And here we are. Shuko Yakumo is older. And if it isn't obvious yet, she's one of the two main characters in this story. She's best girl. Not just in this manga, but in fiction in general. But okay, let's calm down. Look, I know it's a hotly debated topic. Everyone has their favorites. You've got the figures, the wall scrolls, the body pillows. I don't know what kind of person you are, but you know what I'm talking about. Of course, I'm talking about what the kids call a waifu. Look, if you partake in the anime culture, it is but tradition to assert that your chosen waifu or husbando reigns supreme over all the other animated schoolgirls that you could have chosen. It's a thing. I mean, probably not everyone, but many anime fans out there have varying degrees of devotion to their special 2D someone. And it's not always that extreme. It can really be just as simple as a heated debate amongst friends over which girl is the better maid and which one is Rem. You've got a favorite, you've got a waifu. I never found one. Don't know, don't ask. Maybe I'm not enough of an otaku weeb, but my cats have Japanese names and I once stayed in an Airbnb in Tokyo for as long as a tourist visa would allow just to feel like I live there, so can't be that. Sure, I've preferred particular characters over others, but nothing I was ever that passionate about, and who knew it would take this long? But it happened. And what on earth could Shuko Yakumo be that no other anime character has ever been, and why is choosing her as your beloved waifu such a problematic thing to do? Well, it goes beyond just her. But let me get this out of the way. Beauty and the Feast is what this manga is called. And it is one of the dumbest names of a manga I've heard. And I am embarrassed to be one of its biggest fans because of the name alone. The Japanese name is Yakuma-san wa Izuke ga shitai, which definitely doesn't translate to the same thing. In fact, it kind of translates to Yakumo wants to feed. Like she likes to cook and wants to feed you food. Though that doesn't really translate super well directly either. But I simply refuse to believe that Beauty and the Feast was the only other option. Anyway, setting the name aside, Shuko Yakumo, the widow, lives alone in the flat next door to Shohei Yamato, a baseball player who also lives alone. But he's young and hopeless and ends up eating at Shuko's house one night, who was more than happy to cook for him. She invites him back the next day, and so begins the tradition of Shuko cooking for Shohei every night. The simplicity of this story gets you invested quite quickly, like the dude's eating at her house every night. Come on, keep up. But there's mystery and intrigue here. Slowly we hear mentions here and there about Shuko's late husband. Were they in love? How is she coping? What are the implied directions of these events? You're cooking for this guy every night? I mean, you flirt enough. It's a slow burn, but it doesn't feel slow because getting to the next major plot point isn't the motivation behind continuing. The author has so carefully crafted such an entertaining relationship dynamic between these two characters that just watching them interact with each other is where the joy lies. And oh yeah, there's stuff actually going on here. When a big moment strikes, it feels natural, not narratively motivated. There's a realism to the pacing of this story, and it's the characters and their interactions that keep you interested between those key moments. By the fourth chapter, which is still right at the beginning of the story, we get such a menial twist. Oh boy, strap yourselves in. Shohei can't make it to dinner that night. And the story slows, almost to a halt, just for that chapter. She's been cooking for him for a month straight, and now nothing. The day glides by slowly. A glimpse into Shuko's mind is perfectly illustrated. Not cooking for him, huh? I guess I'll read a book or watch some TV. Huh. I didn't eat lunch. I can't sleep for some reason. Yamato-kun? Oh, I forgot something at home. I was grabbing a snack. A snack! Hold out your hand! Try not to drop it. A snack. This is only 4 chapters in, and it was enough to seal my fate. Something about this storytelling is perfect to me. Also, I love cooking, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't get inspiration for dinner that night from reading this manga more than a few times. It's a fantastic story without being overly dramatic. It's wholesome. It's a love story disguised as a cooking show, so surely being Yakumo Shuko's #1 fan can't make you that much of a degenerate. But here I am, refusing to talk about why I like Yakumo Shuko so much because, well, spit it out. What could she have possibly done? Well, I've been lying to you. Or more so, hiding the truth. Because there's no bombshell halfway through this story that will bring your entire Yakumo Shuko-based world crumbling down. Because it happens on the very first chapter. When this story begins, Yakumo Shuko is 28 years old, and Shohei Yamato is 15. Now, we have a couple of options here. We can get desperate. Trust me, man, there's grounds for justification here. Shuko wasn't in love with Yamato. She treated him like a son. Sure, Yamato might have thought Shuko was hot, but that's not a crime, right? They're not even doing anything. They're cooking and sharing food. So to say it's anything else is a stretch. What about the age of consent? Did you know that when this manga was written, 13 was Japan's age of... I'm gonna stop you right there, because that is not the argument you think it is. In fact, it's a perfect example of legality not equating to morality. Also, read this manga and then look me in the eyes and tell me it's not a romance. As soon as you admit that, you have to admit that there's something shifty in the storyline going on here, whether intentional or not. Okay, are we getting to the crux of degeneracy yet? Because I'm not going to pretend that I didn't just say I'm one of this manga's biggest fans and then went right on to tell you there's a weird age gap thing happening here on chapter 1. We throw that word around a lot in this community. Degeneracy. Many of us openly admit to being fans of stories with questionable stuff in it. So what's the connection here between what we're fans of and what it says about us as people? Can I call myself a fan of this manga and at the same time be morally against its concept? Yes. I enjoyed this manga, and I hope you will too. I won't spoil the details. I will say that I found the way in which it deals with this situation to be tactful and done in just about as close as possible to tasteful as it can be done. But I also think that doesn't matter as much as I thought it might. This manga made me question something, and it wasn't, what are my morals? It was, how do my morals differ to what I'm cool with in fiction? Don't let them get confused because they're very different things, and not being observant of that could lead you to miss out on some great stories out there, or worse, be convinced that things that happen in the stories you love are perfectly fine things for real life too. For what it's worth, we do this all the time, subconsciously. We play violent video games. We love guts in Berserk despite being a literal killing machine. It's fiction, and we can differentiate what's real and what's not. What's always more important is the author's intentions with the story and how it should impact you. The events themselves happen in their own moral universe with their own rules, and we can suspend belief. We don't apply those things to our real lives. Only the takeaways of the story as a whole do we translate to be applicable, which is easy to do when it's slicing people's heads off. But the closer the fiction is to the real life in which you live, the harder it becomes to differentiate those moral universes. In Satomi Yu's world, a 15-year-old can grow up and fall in love with a 28-year-old over time, and none of the real-world consequences of that kind of dynamic come into play, because it's fiction. It's fantasy, and we just don't realize it. The takeaway of this story is not that flirty situations between an older woman and a younger guy are good. The takeaway isn't about age at all. For that matter, it would have been nice if he wasn't 15 at the start of the series. I'd prefer it that way. But I like it anyway, and maybe that makes me a world-class degenerate. But that's what makes us all degenerates. We all love these stories that are just enough removed from what is acceptable. We just choose to not let that dictate anything else about our actual lives. It can be taken too far. Sometimes it's so overtly out of pocket that it can feel icky, and that's exactly what happens in the manga that I read when I let a random manga picker choose what I read. I made a whole video, you should watch that video next.